Minutes before the attack, Tomas Allen sent a message to his family. In it, he called himself the friendly federal assassin. He said he did not expect to be forgiven. And then he moved toward the security checkpoint outside a ballroom filled with the President of the United States, the Vice President, and the entire cabinet. This is no longer just a story about shots fired outside a dinner. The new evidence points to something darker. A suspect who spent years building an arsenal in silence, traveled across the country by train, checked into the same hotel days before the event, sent that note to his family, and then moved toward the security zone. Each step was deliberate. Each step is now part of a federal case. The suspect is Tomas Allen, 31, from Torrance, California. Authorities say he is in custody. They say he was armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and knives. They say a Secret Service officer was hit but survived because of a protective vest. And Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche now says preliminary evidence suggests Allen was targeting Trump administration officials, likely including the president. That word, preliminary, matters. This is not a trial. This is not a conviction. This is not the final public record. But the facts already known are serious enough. The travel, the hotel stay, the weapons, the writings, the timing, and the target-rich room all point toward a case investigators are treating as planned political violence. The first version of the story was about the security breach. How did an armed man get close enough to fire near the White House correspondents' dinner? The second version is about the suspect himself. How long had this been building? What did he write? What did he bring? And did anyone see warning signs before he arrived in Washington? According to CBS, Allen traveled by train from Los Angeles to Chicago and then from Chicago to Washington, D.C. He did not simply appear at the hotel on the night of the dinner. Law enforcement sources say he checked into the Washington Hilton before the event, staying there for several days. That changes the timeline from sudden confrontation to staging. A cross-country trip does not prove motive by itself. Plenty of people travel long distances for ordinary reasons. But when that trip ends at the venue hotel, before a highly publicized presidential event, with multiple weapons involved, prosecutors will almost certainly frame it as preparation. The journey becomes part of the case. The weapon timeline matters too. Law enforcement sources told CBS that Allen purchased the shotgun in August 2025, 8 months before the dinner, and also owned a semi-automatic pistol purchased in 2023, more than 2 years before the attack. Those dates are not evidence of guilt by themselves. Americans can legally buy firearms. But in this case, the government will likely use those purchases to argue the arsenal existed long before the attack. That is the prosecution's emerging chain. A pistol purchased years earlier, a shotgun purchased months before the dinner, a cross-country trip, a hotel stay, writings sent minutes before the attack, then the charge toward the checkpoint. Each link will have to be proven, but together, they create the picture investigators are now assembling. Back to the note, because it deserves more than a headline. According to law enforcement accounts reported by the Philadelphia Inquirer, Allen referred to himself as the friendly federal assassin. The writings criticized Trump administration policies directly. They indicated hostility toward people connected to the administration, and they were sent to family minutes before he moved toward the checkpoint. That phrase, friendly federal assassin, is not random. People who commit political violence often create a role for themselves before the act. They turn grievance into identity. They turn personal rage into mission language. That is not analysis from a movie script. It is a documented pattern investigators will examine closely. The full content of the writings has not been released in an official court filing yet. That means we treat the note as major evidence, but not as a complete public record. Blanche has said investigators believe Allen set out to target administration officials, likely including Trump. That is a serious statement from a serious official, but it is still marked preliminary. This is where a lot of coverage can go wrong. A note is powerful, a phrase is powerful, but one phrase cannot replace a full investigation. Prosecutors will need to connect the writings to actions, travel, weapons, hotel access, movement toward the checkpoint, and any statements Allen made before or after arrest. Motive is built from evidence, not one headline. Still, the note changes the story. If investigators confirm it was sent minutes before the attack, and if the contents match the reporting, then this was not just someone arriving armed and losing control. It looks more like someone trying to announce a mission before carrying it out. That is a very different category of threat. There is another detail that should not be ignored. According to reporting, Allen's brother contacted police after receiving the writings in real time. And separately, Allen's sister had previously told authorities he had made extreme statements and talked about taking action regarding world problems. That combination raises a painful question. If family members raised concerns before the attack, when did authorities receive those signals? When did federal law enforcement learn? Where was Allen at that exact moment? In security failures, minutes can become the whole story, and so can months. This is why Signal Drop is covering the second layer of this story. Subscribe if you want more than the breaking headline. Because the real issue now is not only what happened at the checkpoint, it is whether the path to that checkpoint contained signals, family concerns, writings, travel, hotel access, weapons that should have been seen earlier. Allen's background makes the story harder to reduce to a stereotype. Reuters describes him as a Caltech graduate with a technical background. CBS reports he worked in education and was recognized professionally. Other reports describe him as a tutor, engineer, and independent game developer. None of that explains violence. It only reminds us that dangerous intent does not always arrive wearing the costume people expect. That is important because the public often wants instant categories. Was he ideological? Was he unstable? Was he part of a group? Was he radicalized online? Was he acting alone? Authorities currently believe he acted alone, according to reporting. But the digital evidence, writings, witness interviews, and search warrants will decide how much of that picture holds. Allen is reportedly not cooperating with investigators. If that remains true, prosecutors will have to build the case from external evidence: purchases, travel, surveillance footage, hotel records, witness interviews, ballistic evidence, writings, online activity, and family communications. That can be harder, but it can also be cleaner. Documents do not get nervous on the stand. The hotel room search is another major piece. Authorities executed a search connected to his room at the Washington Hilton. The contents have not been publicly disclosed. That room may answer crucial questions: what he brought, when he prepared, whether he left more writings, whether he planned movement through the hotel, and whether anyone else had contact with him. But until the search results are public, do not fill the gap. This is where false stories breed. People will claim there was a manifesto, a network, a foreign link, or a hidden organizer. Maybe new evidence will emerge. Maybe it will not. Right now, the responsible line is simple. Authorities are investigating. No accomplice or foreign link has been confirmed. The rail travel issue is about to become a policy fight. Officials are still investigating how Allen transported weapons across state lines. The contrast with air travel is significant, but this should be discussed carefully. The point is not to publish a how-to manual. The point is that lawmakers and security agencies will now review whether current rail security assumptions fit the threat environment. That debate will get loud because the travel path looks deliberate. Los Angeles to Chicago, Chicago to Washington, then the Washington Hilton. In the public imagination, that is not just movement. It is a line across the country ending at a ballroom full of senior officials. Prosecutors will likely use that line to argue planning. Defense attorneys may argue otherwise. The court process starts to matter immediately. Allen's arraignment is scheduled for Monday in federal court. That hearing will formally present charges and detention questions. The first court filings may reveal the government's strongest early evidence. In cases like this, the detention memo can be more important than any television interview. Why? Because a detention memo often lays out the government's argument for keeping the defendant in custody before trial. It can include timeline details, weapons details, alleged statements, risk assessments, and the evidence prosecutors believe shows danger to the community. If that document is detailed, it could become the backbone of the next phase of the story. Current charges reportedly include using a firearm during a crime of violence and assault on a federal officer with a dangerous weapon. Additional charges may follow. That matters because the legal framing is still evolving. The public may call this an assassination attempt. Trump has called the suspect a would-be assassin, but the court will decide what prosecutors can formally prove. The strongest possible version of the government's case would connect the writings directly to the target, the travel directly to the event, the weapons directly to the attack, and the hotel stay directly to prepositioning. If those pieces line up in court, the premeditation argument becomes much stronger. If pieces remain unclear, the case will still be serious, but the public narrative may shift. The Secret Service angle is still not gone. In fact, this new information makes it sharper. If Allen was a hotel guest for days, then the question is not only how he got near the checkpoint, it is whether hotel guest status allowed him to sit inside the outer environment while the security plan focused on the ballroom perimeter. That is a structural question the review cannot avoid. AP reports that layered security was in place and that officials argue the system worked because Allen never reached the ballroom. That is partly true. The final layer stopped him. But a final layer stopping an armed attacker is not the same as a system having no vulnerabilities. Security reviews are not about slogans, they are about margins. The most uncomfortable margin is distance. How close did he get before being stopped? CBS sources say at least 5 to 8 shots were fired during the incident. One shot can be explained as a sudden burst. Multiple shots indicate a longer danger window. Trump has said the officer was hit from very close distance and that the vest saved him. That is success and alarm in the same sentence. There is also a radicalization question, but that word should not be thrown around lazily. Radicalization is not just having extreme opinions. It is a process where belief, grievance, identity, and perceived mission can move toward violence. If Allen's writings, posts, and family warnings support that pattern, investigators may frame the case that way, but that conclusion has to be earned. The anti-Trump social media reports matter, but they are not enough alone. Millions of people post angry political content without committing violence. A $25 political donation is not a manifesto. The question is whether Allen's posts connect to planning, targeting, weapons, travel, or the note. Investigators will look for escalation, language becoming more specific, more violent, more mission-oriented, and more tied to action. That is the difference between political expression and a threat pathway. A post is a post. A post plus weapons, travel, writings, hotel staging, and an attack is something else. Prosecutors will not rely on one angry statement if they can build a sequence. The sequence is where the case becomes powerful. And if this kind of evidence-first breakdown is why you watch Signal Drop, subscribe and share this with someone already seeing half-baked theories online. This is exactly the kind of story where one false claim can travel faster than the court record. The answer is not silence, it is disciplined reporting. But do not mistake analysis for diagnosis. We do not know Allen's mental health status. We do not know whether he had a clinical condition. We do not know whether ideology, instability, obsession, or some combination drove him. Assigning a label too early only makes the public less informed. The evidence has to do the work. There is a reason this story feels bigger than one suspect. The White House Correspondents' Dinner concentrates politics, media, celebrity, and power in one place. That is its appeal. It is also its vulnerability. The more predictable and prestigious an event becomes, the more attractive it can become to someone looking for symbolic violence. This is why the next 48 hours matter. The arraignment may clarify charges. The detention memo may clarify evidence. The hotel search may clarify planning. The writings may clarify motive. Device warrants may clarify online behavior, and the Secret Service review may clarify whether the security model needs to change for every major political event. For now, there are 3 honest conclusions. First, the suspect appears to have prepared more than the first headlines suggested. Second, authorities believe the Trump administration was likely the target, but the final motive record is still developing. Third, The hotel guest pathway and checkpoint confrontation remain central to understanding how the attack got as close as it did. The family warning angle may become one of the most painful parts of the case. If relatives saw signs, sent concerns, or tried to alert authorities, they may have done exactly what people are told to do. The question then becomes whether the system had enough time, enough information, and enough coordination to act. Sometimes warnings fail because nobody listens. Sometimes they fail because they arrive too late. The public should wait for the timeline before accusing or absolving anyone. The story now sits at the intersection of political violence, personal radicalization, public event security, and federal prosecution. That is why it will not disappear after one news cycle. Every new filing can change the public understanding. Every new detail can move the case from what happened toward how long was this coming. The old lesson applies again. The most dangerous attacks often look obvious only after the timeline is reconstructed. Beforehand, the pieces are scattered. A weapon purchase, a strange statement, a trip, a hotel room, a message to family. Afterward, they look like a chain. The job now is to determine which pieces were knowable before the shots. Thomas Allen is in custody. The president is safe. The officer survived. But the evidence now points toward a deeper question than the first night allowed. Was this a last-minute eruption, or a slow-building political attack that moved across the country, entered a familiar hotel, and nearly exposed one of Washington's most protected rooms? He called himself the friendly federal assassin. The court filings will tell us how much of that identity was real, how much was planned, and how far back the line actually starts.